All right, boys and girls, here's a Christmas quiz for you. Do you know what this is? Do you? How about this? Gives you a hint. How about this? Do you know what they are? Are they a book? Are they a magazine? Or is it a Christmas card? Who said Christmas card? Did you say it? You're right. It is a Christmas card. Merry Christmas, everyone. Here's another Christmas quiz for you. Who invented the Christmas card? Do you know? It was invented, or the first one was published actually, in 1843 by a man named John Collicott Horsley. That was 170 years ago, way before we had cars, airplanes, cell phones, or TVs. Way before all that. Back 170 years ago, people rode around on horses and buggies. They read books, believe it or not, and they wrote on slate tablets. Back 170 years ago, they did have one thing that we have today. Do you know what it is? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with Christmas. Did someone say Santa Claus? That's right. 170 years ago, they did have Santa Claus. Santa Claus was making his rounds. He was keeping his list of all the good girls and boys. He was making his rounds, and every Christmas season he would go out and he would pass out Christmas presents to all the good girls and boys all over the earth. But here's a question for you. Do you know where John Collicott Horsley got the idea for a Christmas card? I'll give you a hint. He got the idea from Santa's Littlest Elf. This is the story of Santa's Littlest Elf and the very first ever Christmas card. Tinsel was Santa's littlest elf. He was small and he was cute. He had wavy silver hair and he was always a pretty happy little guy. But Tinsel had one small problem. Just one small problem. He wasn't very big. Nope, he wasn't very big at all. In fact, pretty much everything was bigger than Tinsel. But Tinsel was an elf, and elves like to build toys. And Tinsel, like all elves, wanted to build toys. But the hammers were bigger than Tinsel, the other tools were bigger than Tinsel, the screwdrivers were bigger than Tinsel, and the workbench was way up there. But that didn't stop Tinsel from trying. He would climb up to the top of the workbench, try to grab a hold of the hammer, and try to make toys like the other elves. But he couldn't hold on to the tools. The hammer would fall out of his hands, and it would fall off the workbench, it would bounce on the floor, it would hit something else, and would make a big mess. And his mom would say, "Oh my," and his dad would say, "Oh dear," and they would say, "Don't worry, Tinsel, when you get to be bigger, you'll be able to make toys just like the other elves." So Tinsel waited, and waited, and waited. But Tinsel didn't get any bigger. Christmases came and Christmases went, and Tinsel stayed the same size. He was always Santa's littlest elf. So Tinsel did the best he could to help out in the workshop. He'd run errands for the other elves. Sometimes they needed to take a piece of one toy over to another workbench. They had a very special wagon that Tinsel would pull and carry the toy from one elf to another. Sometimes he would help Santa order supplies. They'd run out of wood or some paint, and it was Tinsel's job to help get that for the workshop. And sometimes Tinsel would help glue the small, tiny places on a toy where it was really hard to reach with the glue. And every now and then, a bigger elf would drop something small inside a toy, and it was Tinsel's job to go in and get it out and give it back to the elf so he could finish the toy. Tinsel liked helping out, but he really, really, really wanted to make his own toy. Well, in the Christmas of 1842, the elves were working as hard as they could to get all the toys ready for Christmas, but they were behind schedule. Tinsel knew it, the elves knew it, and Santa knew it. Everyone was working as hard as they could, but it was a few days before Christmas, and the elves did not have all the toys ready for all the good girls and boys. Tinsel wanted to help. That night, when all the elves packed up their workbenches and went home for dinner, Tinsel was in the workshop all by himself. He looked around. Nobody was watching, so he climbed up to the workbench and he saw the parts for a fire engine. So he got the base of the fire engine out and he started getting the tools. Did pretty good. He got the sides on, but he was in the process of trying to get the roof on the fire engine. It was really heavy. It was trying to lift it up. It was higher than he could lift up, and he slipped. The fire engine started to roll backwards. The roof of the fire engine hit the hammer. The hammer fell off the workbench. It bounced up, hit a can of green paint. That can of green paint fell off the workbench, bounced, and splashed green paint everywhere. The fire engine rolled off the back of the bench. Tinsel tried to stop it. He grabbed on to hang on, but the fire engine went off the side. It hit a chair that was behind the workbench. The fire engine and Tinsel hit the chair. The chair fell over, hit the workbench behind him, and like a string of dominoes, the workbenches in the workshop fell over, and it was a really loud crash. All the elves came running to see what the noise was. Santa came running to see what the noise was. And as soon as Santa saw Tinsel sitting in a big mess, he knew what had happened. "Tinsel, have you been trying to build toys?" Santa asked. "Yes, Santa," Tinsel said. "Tinsel, you know you're not big enough to build toys." "I know, sir," Tinsel said. "I know, but I was just trying to help. Tinsel, we're behind schedule. You know you're not supposed to build toys. I'm going to have to ask you to stay out of the workshop until Christmas is over." Tinsel felt horrible. He started to cry and he ran out of the workshop and started running down the hall. He turned a corner and the next thing you know, he was in the paint room. He was so upset he really wanted to sit down and cry. And as he was walking over towards a bench, there was a big splash of red paint that someone had spilled on the floor in the paint room. Tinsel accidentally stepped in it and he slid across the floor, spinning around as he went. It was actually kind of fun, like skating on an ice rink. When Tinsel looked back, he saw a beautiful red line on the floor. All of a sudden, Tinsel had a really good idea. He went over to the wall, he got a piece of paper, and he laid it out. Then he went to the paints and he got a bunch of different paints and he spilled them on the floor. He took off his shoes and he took his socks and he stepped in the paint and he ran across the paper, skating across the paper in different colors and making a beautiful design. When he was all finished with that particular design, he turned the paper over, stepped in black ink in his socks, and wrote, "Dear Santa, I am very sorry for the mess I made in the workshop. Please forgive me. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. Love, Tinsel." When Tinsel finished that card, he set it aside to dry, and he decided he'd make cards for all the other elves. So Tinsel got busy making cards for all the other elves. He was so busy making cards for all the other elves that he completely forgot what time it was. All of a sudden he heard a bell ringing, and he knew that bell was the Christmas Eve bell. All the elves were loading up the toys on the sleigh, and Santa was getting ready to go out for Christmas Eve. Tinsel took all the cards he'd made, he put them in a big stack, put them on a little wheelbarrow, and ran out to the sleigh. When he got there, the elves were just finishing packing up the sleigh. Santa was finishing up hooking up the reindeer. Tinsel very quietly walked over and gave Santa his card, and then he walked around to each of the elves and gave an elf a card. Nobody had ever seen anything like that before. Santa hadn't seen anything like that before, and the elves hadn't seen anything like it before either. Santa opened his card and read his card. The elves watched Santa open his card, they opened their card, and they read their card. Nobody knew what to do. All of a sudden there was this jolly ho, ho, ho. Santa had a big smile on his face, and with a big red mitten, he reached down and scooped up Tinsel. "Tinsel, you have given me a fantastic gift." Santa was about to say something else when one of the elves stepped forward. An elf said, stepping out from behind the other elves. "Yes, Smitty," Santa said. "Sir, may I have a word?" "Certainly, Smitty." Smitty walked over to Santa and whispered in his ear. No one could hear what Smitty was saying, but he kept pointing to the card that Tinsel had given him. They talked for a few minutes. Then Smitty stepped away and got back with the other elves. Santa stood there for a moment more, pulling on his whiskers, thinking. No one was sure what Santa was thinking, but after a minute, He looked at Tinsel with a big smile and gleam in his eye and said, "Tinsel, you have given us the Christmas card. Christmas is a season of sharing. And thanks to you, you've given us a way where we can share the greatest of joys in the simplest of ways. And tonight, I will take your Christmas card and I will share it with the rest of God's people so that each year they can all share the joys of Christmas by simply sharing a card." The elves and Santa finished packing up the sleigh, and Santa took off. Well, I don't have to tell you what happened after that. As you may know, Santa stopped by John Collicock Horsley's house. And while John was sleeping, Santa left the first Christmas card by his bed. When John woke up, he found the first Christmas card, and that gave him his idea. And that year, which was 1843, John published the first Christmas card ever. Today we share almost 2 billion Christmas cards. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and we exchange 2 billion Christmas cards. That's 2 billion thoughts of joy and kindness that we spread each year at this time. Oh, let me tell you one other thing you might not know about Christmas. Now that you know where John got the idea for the first Christmas card, do you know why we put tinsel on our Christmas trees? Does anybody know why we decorate tinsel on our Christmas trees? Anybody? Well, let me tell you. Do you remember that wavy silver hair that Tinsel has? Well, the tinsel we put on our Christmas tree is a reminder of that wavy hair that Tinsel had on his head. So this year, whether you're sharing a Christmas card or decorating your tree with Christmas tinsel, I hope you remember the magic of Tinsel, Santa's littlest elf, and the joy of the first Christmas card. Merry Christmas, everybody. Spread the Christmas cheer.